Star Wars A New Hope felt simple when it landed in 1977. Farm boy becomes hero, good defeats evil, roll credits. But beneath that clarity lives something stranger, something built on misdirection, hidden perspective, and stories told from the edges rather than the center. The film opened with power, not people. It introduced resistance before royalty, and it quietly positioned droids, not Skywalkers, as the saga's true witnesses. These are 20 hidden details you completely missed in Star Wars A New Hope. Number 1. The film opens with power, not a hero. The first moving object isn't Luke Skywalker or Princess Leia, it's a Star Destroyer, a massive triangular war machine that fills the frame from top to bottom, overwhelming the audience before any character even speaks. The opening shot establishes fear before hope, oppression before rebellion, scale before humanity. George Lucas made a deliberate choice to begin with overwhelming force rather than relatable characters, reversing traditional narrative expectations established by films like The Wizard of Oz. Cinematographer Gilbert Taylor, who had previously shot Dr. Strangelove, framed the sequence to emphasize the destroyer's unstoppable momentum. Characters arrive only after the audience understands what they're up against. That inversion, opening with the antagonist's strength rather than the protagonist's journey, set A New Hope apart from every adventure film that came before it. Number 2. Leia is introduced as resistance, not royalty. Princess Leia doesn't appear in a throne room or palace. She's captured, interrogated, and tortured before any royal title defines her position. The film shows her strength before revealing her status, establishing character through action rather than exposition. Carrie Fisher understood this approach immediately, playing Leia's defiance as instinct rather than performance after studying Katharine Hepburn's confrontational energy in The African Queen. Leadership isn't declared through titles or ceremonies. It's demonstrated under pressure, in moments where surrender would be easier than continued resistance. That layered introduction prevents audiences from reducing Leia to a damsel archetype, establishing her as an active participant in the rebellion before romance or rescue ever enters the equation. Number 3. Vader is framed as myth before man. Darth Vader enters through smoke and darkness, stepping over bodies without hesitation or explanation. The film provides no backstory, no origin, no humanizing context. He simply exists, fully formed as an inevitability rather than a character. Lucas deliberately withheld information about Vader's past, treating him like a force of nature rather than a person with motivations to explain. Gilbert Taylor lit Vader's introductory scene to maximize shadow, obscuring details, and preserving mystery. Even the voice actor James Earl Jones, after David Prowse's physical performance was completed, was separated from the body, creating layers of distance between the character and any recognizable humanity. Vader isn't introduced as someone to understand, but as something to survive. Number 4. The Stormtroopers win the opening fight. The Empire breaches the rebel ship efficiently, methodically, and without hesitation. Stormtroopers move in formation, coordinate fire, and overwhelm defenders through superior numbers and discipline. They're competent, effective, and genuinely dangerous in this opening sequence, establishing Imperial strength as real rather than superficial. Later films and cultural parody turned Stormtroopers into jokes, mocked for terrible aim and incompetence, but A New Hope introduces them as a legitimate military threat, soldiers who win battles decisively, trained with tactical precision reminiscent of the Imperial forces in Akira Kurosawa's The Hidden Fortress. Hope only matters in a story where victory isn't guaranteed, where the opposition is genuinely formidable. Stunt coordinator Peter Diamond choreographed the breach sequence to emphasize overwhelming Imperial efficiency. It's survival. Number 5. R2-D2 is the story's real main character. The plot begins when R2-D2 receives Leia's message, follows R2 escaping the starship, and ends with R2 delivering the Death Star plans that enable the rebellion's victory. George Lucas later explained in interviews that the entire saga is told from the droids' perspective, calling them the witnesses who observe the larger story unfolding around them. R2 initiates every major plot movement in A New Hope. Human characters react to situations R2 creates or information R2 provides. Kenny Baker, the performer inside R2-D2, brought physical personality to a character that could have been purely mechanical. That structural choice, positioning a non-speaking droid as the true engine of the plot, was radical for 1977 and remains one of the film's most overlooked narrative strategies. Number 6. Tatooine is designed to feel trapped. The planet's landscapes stretch endlessly in wide establishing shots filmed in Tunisia's desert regions, suggesting vast open space and limitless horizons. But Luke Skywalker's scenes are dominated by claustrophobic framing, boxed compositions, and oppressive architecture that contradicts the visual openness. Production designer John Barry and cinematographer Gilbert Taylor deliberately framed Luke inside doorways, beneath low ceilings, and surrounded by tight corridors. Even exterior shots position Luke against walls or inside narrow spaces rather than allowing him freedom within the frame. frame, employing techniques Taylor had used in A Hard Day's Night by the Beatles to convey being trapped by fame. It's a response to an environment that visually traps him in every scene, reinforcing his status as someone confined by circumstances beyond his control. Number 7. Luke's longing is shown without dialogue. The twin sons scene contains no exposition, no plot advancement, and no functional storytelling purpose. Luke simply stands alone, watching two suns set over the desert, while John Williams' Force theme swells. The moment exists purely to establish emotional hunger, a yearning for something beyond the life he's been given. George Lucas fought to keep the scene during editing, despite pressure from Fox executives to cut anything that didn't directly advance the plot. The music, framing, and silence communicate longing more effectively than dialogue ever could. Mark Hamill stood on the Tunisian sand for multiple takes as the sun actually set, grounding the moment in genuine environmental beauty. That non-verbal communication, trusting visuals and score to carry emotional weight, became one of A New Hope's defining techniques. Number 8. Obi-Wan avoids direct instruction. Throughout their interactions, Obi-Wan Kenobi never tells Luke what to feel, believe, or choose. Instead, he asks questions, offers observations, and withholds certainty. When Luke asks about the Force, Obi-Wan describes it rather than defining it. He simply states facts and allows Luke to reach his own conclusions. Alec Guinness played Obi-Wan with deliberate restraint, avoiding the authoritative mentor archetype that would have been expected in 1977 adventure films, drawing instead on his experience playing understated wisdom in The Bridge on the River Kwai. Faith must be chosen, not taught. That restraint makes Luke's eventual commitment feel earned rather than imposed, a personal decision rather than obedience to authority. The relationship models teaching through presence rather than instruction, wisdom communicated through example rather than lectures. Number 9. The cantina introduces moral ambiguity early. The Mos Eisley Cantina places heroes and criminals in the same crowded space, drinking side by side without clear moral boundaries. Violence erupts suddenly and without ceremony when Obi-Wan severs an arm with his lightsaber, an act of shocking brutality, played without dramatic pause or moral judgment. Lucas used the cantina sequence to establish that the galaxy isn't clean, sanitized, or morally simple. The scene introduces a world where survival requires navigating gray areas rather than choosing obvious sides, much like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. Han Solo's introduction reinforces this ambiguity. He's desperate, in debt, and willing to shoot Greedo under the table to escape consequences. The cantina scene, filmed with elaborate prosthetics created by makeup artist Stuart Freeborn, shows that the rebellion exists within a galaxy where right and wrong aren't always clearly marked. Number 10. Han is introduced running from consequences. Debt defines Han Solo before charm does. His first scene establishes him as someone trapped by financial obligations, chased by Greedo, and desperate enough to take any job that pays. Harrison Ford understood that Han wasn't a hero in this moment, but a survivor making calculated decisions to stay alive. The script deliberately positioned Han as morally questionable, someone whose loyalty could be bought and whose principles remain negotiable. Lucas wanted audiences uncertain about whether Han would betray the group or eventually commit to their cause, creating tension similar to Humphrey Bogart's character arc in The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. The performance made Han's later heroism feel earned precisely because it wasn't guaranteed from the beginning. Number 11. The Falcon is framed as unreliable on purpose. Every mechanical failure, every sputtering engine, every system malfunction builds mistrust between the ship and its passengers. The Millennium Falcon doesn't inspire confidence. It breaks down repeatedly, requires constant maintenance, and barely escapes danger through luck rather than engineering excellence. The ship mirrors Han Solo's self-image, a battered exterior hiding capabilities that only emerge under extreme pressure. Lucas deliberately designed the Falcon to look worn, ugly, and pieced together from salvage rather than presenting a sleek futuristic vessel, rejecting the polished aesthetics of 2001, A Space Odyssey. Production designer John Barry modeled the Falcon's interior on World War II bomber cockpits, emphasizing cramped functionality over comfort. The Falcon becomes a character defined by imperfection, survival, and stubborn refusal to quit despite every reason to fail. Number 12. The Death Star feels bureaucratic. Meetings dominate the Death Star's interior scenes. Uniformed officers gather around conference tables. Procedures are followed. Evil operates through systems, committees, and administrative hierarchy rather than passionate villainy. George Lucas studied fascist aesthetics and corporate culture when designing the Empire's visual language, drawing inspiration from Leni Riefenstahl's Triumph of the Will. The Death Star isn't a throne room or dark castle. It's an office building, a military installation where oppression is implemented through policy rather than personal cruelty. Peter Cushing, cast as Tarkin after his iconic horror performances for Hammer Films, brought quiet menace to bureaucratic evil. The design choice made the Empire feel more realistic and therefore more frightening. Oppression doesn't require monsters, it requires systems that normalize cruelty, reduce resistance to paperwork, and transform violence into procedure. Number 13. Alderaan is destroyed without musical relief. When Tarkin orders the planet's destruction, no heroic score rises to guide audience emotion. No dramatic pause allows for processing. The planet simply explodes, billions of lives erased in a moment, rendered with cold efficiency. John Williams deliberately withheld music from the sequence, refusing to provide emotional comfort or narrative framing, a technique he'd later employ in Schindler's List. Loss happens suddenly, without warning or cinematic ceremony, mimicking the randomness of real tragedy. Carrie Fisher played the moment with numb shock rather than theatrical grief, understanding that devastation of this scale resists immediate emotional expression. The lack of score forces viewers to sit with the horror rather than being guided through it, a choice that made Alderaan's destruction one of the film's most unsettling moments despite its brief screen time. Number 14. Obi-Wan dies without spectacle. The lightsaber duel between Obi-Wan and Vader contains no elaborate choreography, no dramatic speeches, and no prolonged final moments. Obi-Wan simply raises his blade, allows Vader to strike, and vanishes. No slow motion captures his fall. No extended dialogue delivers final wisdom. Faith replaces presence in a single, understated moment. Alec Guinness requested the death scene be handled with restraint, arguing that spectacle would undermine the spiritual implications of becoming one with the Force. The simplicity shocked test audiences accustomed to prolonged death. Scenes in action films like The Wild Bunch, but Lucas understood that Obi-Wan's disappearance needed to feel mysterious rather than explained. His voice returns immediately, guiding Luke through the Force, proving that death didn't end his presence but transformed it into something less visible and more powerful. Number 15. Vader never celebrates victory. After destroying rebel fighters, after executing officers, after achieving tactical objectives, Darth Vader never pauses to savor success or display satisfaction. He observes, analyzes, and moves immediately to the next task. Emotion belongs to others, control belongs to him. David Prowse and James Earl Jones created a performance defined by absolute discipline, a character who treats every victory as expected rather than celebrated. Lucas directed Vader to remain emotionally flat, withholding the theatrical villainy audiences might expect from a character in black armor wielding a red blade. Jones modulated his voice to remove any trace of triumph or pleasure, maintaining cold efficiency throughout every line recorded at 20th Century Fox's sound facilities. Number 16. The Force is never visually shown. No special effects mark the Force's presence when Obi-Wan uses it to influence Stormtroopers, or when Luke trusts it during the trench run. The film refuses to visualize spiritual power, keeping it invisible and internal. Belief operates through suggestion, reaction, and trust rather than concrete imagery. Lucas deliberately avoided showing the Force as light, energy, or any visible manifestation, rejecting the glowing effects common in contemporary science fiction like Close Encounters of the Third Kind. The restraint forced audiences to accept the Force on faith, mirroring the character's own relationship with it. He simply trusts Obi-Wan's voice and fires without targeting computers. That invisibility makes the Force feel more profound than any visual effect could achieve, positioning it as a philosophical concept rather than a superpower with flashy displays. Number 17. The trench run mirrors World War II dogfights. Camera angles, pacing, and tension during the Death Star assault sequence borrow directly from war films Lucas studied extensively during pre-production. He screened footage from the Dam Busters, 633 Squadron, and archival combat films, analyzing how directors built suspense during aerial attacks. Editor Paul Hirsch cut the trench run to match the rhythm of real bomber missions, where pilots faced anti-aircraft fire, tight corridors, and narrow margins for error. Fantasy was grounded in historical fear, making the sequence feel tactically real rather than purely cinematic. Even the communication patterns between pilots echo military radio protocol from World War II missions. Victory feels earned rather than magical because the combat follows logic audiences recognize from historical warfare. Number 18. Luke succeeds only when he stops listening. Technology fails him when targeting computers can't lock onto the thermal exhaust port. Authority abandons him when squadron leaders die before completing the mission. Luke achieves victory only after switching off his targeting system and trusting the Force over machinery. Lucas structured the climax to force Luke into choosing between rational strategy and spiritual belief, rejecting rejecting the machine solves everything philosophy of Stanley Kubrick's 2001, A Space Odyssey. Obi-Wan's voice guides him to abandon logic, to release control, and allow the Force to work through instinct rather than calculation. Mark Hamill's performance shifts from tense concentration to serene acceptance the moment he switches off the targeting computer. He stops relying on external systems and learns to trust internal guidance, completing the journey from dependency to self-reliance that defined his character arc. Number 19. The medal ceremony is emotionally hollow. The score swells triumphantly while characters stand in formal lines, but almost no one speaks. No dialogue processes what just happened. No reflection acknowledges the cost of victory or the friends lost during the assault. The ceremony feels ritualistic and distant, celebration without genuine emotional connection. Lucas deliberately staged the sequence as formal rather than intimate, understanding that victory doesn't erase trauma or immediately heal wounds. The rebellion destroyed the Death Star, but the Empire still controls the galaxy. Alderaan remains gone. The medal ceremony, filmed in the massive Yavin Temple set constructed at EMI Elstree Studios, acknowledges tactical success while avoiding the uncomfortable reality that the war isn't over and losses remain unprocessed. That restraint prevents A New Hope from feeling falsely resolved, maintaining tension even during what should be a purely triumphant moment. Number 20. The ending promises myth, not closure. The Empire still exists. Darth Vader survived the battle and escaped into space. The rebellion destroyed one weapon but didn't dismantle the system that built it. Hope is established as a beginning rather than a conclusion, a first victory in a war that will continue long after credits roll. George Lucas structured A New Hope to feel complete as a standalone film while leaving every major conflict unresolved, following the serial structure of Flash Gordon episodes he loved as a child. Editor Marcia Lucas fought to preserve the ambiguous ending against studio pressure for clearer resolution. It promises that resistance is possible, that tyranny can be challenged, and that hope itself is worth fighting for even when final triumph remains uncertain. Star Wars A New Hope feels simple because it's carefully restrained, built on withheld information, hidden perspectives, and stories told from unexpected angles. Its power comes from what it refuses to explain, the certainties it withholds, and the comfort it denies. From opening with machines instead of heroes to ending with unresolved galactic conflict, from positioning droids as witnesses to keeping the Force invisible, every choice shaped how audiences experienced myth disguised as adventure. Which hidden detail changed how you see the film, and which Star Wars story should we unravel next?